What's going on, everyone? My name is Jason Vinson. I am a wedding and documentary photographer based in Northwest Arkansas. And today I am talking with Tyler Stableford, who is a Canon Explorer of Light. And he was lucky enough to be able to use the Canon R5 much before its announcement. So we're going to be chatting a little bit about that experience. But Tyler, go ahead and for those that don't know you, kind of give us a little roundout of what it is you do.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I'm Tyler Stableford. I'm a director and photographer based in Colorado. And yeah, fortunate to be a Canon Explorer of Light. And as you mentioned, I got to have early access to a couple of the R5 cameras and to shoot a promotional campaign for them and put the camera through the paces.
Awesome. So when you say director of photography, what kind of stuff do you shoot? What kind of, I assume, campaigns and things like that, but do you have like
Yeah, thanks.
a general area of expertise?
Yeah, I shoot a range of commercials, directing commercials for a lot of large companies, international companies, and local, as well as directing and DPing different documentaries. And then I'm also a stills photographer. So, yeah, so I shoot a whole range of things from commercials to documentaries to stills projects. And really, that's my gig is as an assignment, freelance director and photographer.
Okay, awesome. I was creeping on your Instagram before our call, and I saw that you were an Emmy Award winning photographer. So what does that look like? What did you
Oh,
win for?
yes. Yeah, it's Emmy award-winning director. I directed a documentary for the Turning Point TV series, and we were fortunate to win an Emmy Award for that. That was a feature documentary episode that featured a man named Richard Joyner in North Carolina, an unbelievable guy. He was named a CNN Top 10 hero, and he's a nonprofit leader and a Reverend Baptist minister in North Carolina. And so just having the opportunity to tell his story and to share it with the world was one of the highlights of my career. And we won an Emmy for the project, and I sent the Emmy statue to him the next day after I got it, because the story, it was really his. I mean, he deserves it. So
That's super awesome. That's cool to hear. So how long before the release were you able to play with the R5?
yeah, I've got the R5 camera. I can't remember if it was either late February or early March. So I had it
Okay.
for some time,
Yeah.
and so and also I would say, so that's a, pre-production camera. That's what, almost 6 months before the actual production release or so.
Yeah.
And so even though it was a pre-release camera, everything I saw was just incredibly exciting. In fact, I couldn't quite, believe it as I, started to work with it, honestly.
Yeah. So were you primarily using it for video or for photography, or just a little bit of both?
Yeah, and so Canon asked me if I could do primarily a video, project with it, but also stills as well. Um, I kind of make my living equally from both ends of things, stills and
Okay.
cinematography. So I was keenly interested to check it out, on both sides. So,
Awesome.
but the bulk of it was video related for what I did with it.
Okay, cool. So what's kind of like your main camera before the R5 came out?
Yeah. Um, so I'd say, as a director, the long way to answer it, I'll try to answer as quickly as I can. But as a director, and when I'm hiring DPs on commercial projects, I've worked with every camera brand of different things
Mhm.
that my DPs want to work with, that's in their package and that type of thing. So I'm familiar with it. And then when I'm DPing or filming myself, a lot of times I've been working with the C300 Mark II.
Okay.
The C500 Mark II has been really great recently. And then I do love the DSLR cameras. So the 1DX Mark III, was a workhorse for me too, this winter and in spring when that came out. I'm a big proponent of small, small tools for artists. I think we can do better art when our paintbrushes don't require two hands to wield around that way, that we can paint
Absolutely.
finer strokes with lighter tools.
So where do you see the R5 being in just like your general workflow?
Yeah, I would say I'm going to be leaning on the R5 a lot, like as heavily as I can. I mean, in terms of what I saw from my test, just going on the stills, at 20 frames a second or so. And again, I didn't do a strict test with a stopwatch or anything, but it was,
Mhm.
unbelievably fast. The autofocus really surprised me. I said, "Whoa, this is a mirrorless camera has really, really high-end autofocus. And so to answer your question, I would say I'll be using it alongside the 1DX Mark III for, I would not hesitate to use it for
Mhm.
high action sports. I'll take the 1DX3 with me. Being in Colorado and being a more adventure photographer and filmmaker, I end up in the mountains skiing and ice climbing and rock climbing in the rain or snow or different things. And that's where a more robust weather sealed body, the 1D series, can be helpful. But gosh, I love the lightweight of the R5. So I would say it's going to be a big one for stills, and then I'm going to use the heck out of it for video as well.
Yeah. What would you say is your favorite new feature that's been introduced on the R5?
Yeah. Couple of things I'd say. Well, so there's a few things. If I had to limit it to one, the in-body stabilization blew me away.
Okay.
And I did tests with that. And so I'm primarily a director and photographer, and I don't work every day as let's call it as like a Hollywood DP, that type of thing, in terms of being a director of photography, operating cameras all the time. Those who I do hire and work with, as a director, when you have like a super high-end DP who's just so skilled with camera movements, I can't get to that level, while also working as a director and photographer, but I really admire that with DPs. What I'll say is this in-body stabilization, like, at least gets me half the distance to the goal that
It's
way.
somewhat bridged the gap for you.
Full-time, full-time, DPs and how smooth they are. And believe me, I'm not taking away from their craft and everything that goes into it. It's not just as easy as having a stabilized camera body, but it's a big deal with it. So instantly I was seeing that, oh man, my camera moves are just smoother. Particularly I did tests with both the EF and the RF lenses, and I found the greatest results really with the new RF lenses for stability and smoothness of panning, of just hand holding. And like, for an example, like, oh, let me just try this. I'll put the 70-200 f2.8 to RF lens on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just take it to 200 millimeters and I'll put the image stabilization on, and I'm just going to pan and do a pan. I mean, you could never do this ever, with any type of professional results before. And I could do a handheld pan. Now, of course, if I was being, paid to do this, I'd put it on a tripod and do it well. But my point is, you can get away with it easily. And then you shoot 8K if you want, or 4K, and then you can, add more stability. It opens up new realms of handheld cinematography, and that doesn't just mean quick, it just means more creative, and we can do more with less tools and less time.
Do you, of all the features that everyone's talking about, there's obviously like the main hitters, the stabilization, autofocus, and stuff like that. Is there anything that you feel like is kind of flying under the radar that people aren't talking about that you think is worth noting?
Yeah, I think something that's worth noting for me is just, it's a small package. It has the articulating LCD screen and the tap focus, the eye and the face tracking. So I did tests, with a biker. I'd ride bikes, or I'd jump rope, or I'd have my coworkers ride bikes as fast as possible by me, and really trying to get fast moving sports subjects going past. And two things are great. One is the autofocus is super strong, but the face tracking will track, on a subject as they cross from your frame, anything from the the lower right to the upper left of the frame. And I can't remember what the specs are. Is it 80 or 90% or some portion of the frame where you get all of the the focus to follow your subject?
I think I heard 100%.
It may be 100%. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not up to speed on it, but it's a lot. And the point is, I think a lot of our most compelling frames, our subject is in a powerful spot. I'm just looking at my little window on our podcast here, but a lot of times, like, I'll put the subject, right about here in a frame, the way you're seeing me. And in the past, it's harder to focus on someone's eyes if they're right there in that portion of the frame. And so now the autofocus was tremendous that way. So I think that's something that we'll all find is really opening up a lot of possibilities for us. Is that
that's been
autofocus.
That's been kind of the general consensus, because you're like this whole realm of focus and recompose is out the window now, because you're no longer limited to like this finite number of focusing points. They're just everywhere. So you don't have to worry about this recomposing business anymore.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And it just follows the person as they go. So that's been pretty powerful for us.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so after how long did you get to use the cameras for? Do you still have them?
I still have one that I've been, very reluctant to give it up. But also, I mean, I've pre-ordered two. I mean, a small, lesser known thing is, I mean, for me, as an explorer of light, still have to buy, buy my gear
Yeah.
from Canon. And so, I mean, as the ultimate endorsement, it's far from free, for me. And so I've got two cameras on pre-order, and that, so I'm not like in any way like being paid to say, hey, these, I'm paying for these cameras.
Right. After using them for a while, are there any wish list items that you think need to be added via firmware update, or like, when the next model, the R5 Mark II or something comes out, is there anything that you wish would be on there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I can always nitpick specifically for me. It doesn't always apply to other shooters. I think this camera is exceptional. And like I'd say, as I look at the R5 and the R6, and the R6 has more of the sensor, about, was it a 20 megapixel
Mm-hmm.
sensor or so there, and the R5 is 45 megapixels. I'm always looking for that, just the best balance of low light performance, speed. I would say, gosh, I would love to see, an R5 as well, with like the low light performance that we'll get from the R6. But it's a
Yeah.
trade-off either way.
Yeah.
That way, ideally, I would have both. Like
Mm-hmm.
in R5 with 45 megapixels, and also a version like that had all the power, all the workhorse, and then with a 20 megapixel sensor too.
Yeah.
And that would be the equivalent of, I can't remember how many megapixels that would be in, or or what K that would be in video, but you understand,
Yeah.
anytime you go higher in megapixels, you're just ultimately going to compromise on your low light performance in some way. And
Mm-hmm.
at times with your dynamic range, there's a subtle trade-off there that I think too often in the media, people clamor for megapixels or don't pay enough attention to bit depth and dynamic range in files. And those are things that I find I work a lot with, whether I'm processing still images in Lightroom or Photoshop, or taking into color grading, the raw files, the video files as well.
Yeah. Awesome. What,
Anyway,
what,
that's a long answer for you. Sorry to get it,
no,
but
no,
yeah,
that
so
makes
I
sense.
gave you a
That makes total
technical
sense for
answer.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff did you shoot with the R5?
Yeah, so we took it into a gym in Denver with a model and actor, friend of mine, Chad Pinther. He's got a great gym in Denver, and we filmed a little promo commercial with him, lifting all sorts of Olympic lifting and sled pushing and rope whipping. We wanted to create scenes that had super dynamic backlight, screaming backlight, haze, heavy shadows, and just that's kind of the style of imagery that I'm drawn to.
Mm-hmm.
Is heavily backlit, type of high dynamic range imagery. So we shot a range of 8K, 4K video at all different frame rates and stuff, and then also stills, both lit with strobes, with bigger strobes, with my own chrome strobes, and then also just rapid firing at 20 frames per second as he's whipping the ropes.
That's always fun.
Yeah.
It's like basically creating like little movies with raw files.
Yes, exactly. It is. Yeah. So creating a lot. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, just, as you've looked at specs, what interests you about the camera, or what's lighting your fire with it, if anything?
I'm primarily a Sony shooter, so I've had the 20 frames per second with silent shooting and stuff like that. So it's cool to actually finally see that show up in other models.
Yeah.
Just because like every time someone asks me, I mostly shoot weddings, so being able to be completely silent is something that I never thought I needed, but once I have it now, I'm like, I could never use anything else that didn't have that. So it's cool to see that finally available.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I agree. And a lot of the shoots that I'm on, either I'm directing or filming and we have a still shooter attached, or alternatively, I'm a still shooter attached to a video production. And it's just essential these days, really, to have that silent shutter. when you're
Yeah.
working that way, and for weddings, of course, where you
Yeah.
are.
And I feel like that's going to be something that's going to be a requirement in the future, especially for like documentary type stuff, especially you see like presidential speeches and stuff, and like you just hear shutters all the time going
Yeah,
off, and it's like
right.
pretty soon I feel like they're going to just be like silent shutter and that's all you get, and then you don't have to
Hmm.
worry about it anymore, like Olympics and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
Very cool.
Agreed.
So where can people find you?
Oh yeah. So my website is tylerstableford.com, and I am on Instagram and Facebook at Tyler Stableford as well.
Okay, awesome. Are you pretty active on Facebook or Instagram, or mostly Instagram, or?
Moderately active, yeah. I feel some compulsion. Yeah, it's funny. I do. I think I'd probably do the basics to be a part of the business, but
Yeah.
I'm a bit more of an outdoor person. I think if left to my own devices, I don't find myself scrolling on my phone very often. Usually it's down and I'm out hiking or climbing or hunting in the woods or something like that.
Yeah, I pulled up Instagram to look up your account today, and I was like, glanced at mine. I was like, I haven't posted in like 2 months. I should probably like maybe throw up some images or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Tyler, I appreciate you hopping on here and chatting with me.
Jason, thanks.
Yeah, I hope you have a good one. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to chat with you. Thanks very much for your interest.
Yeah, talk to you later.
Okay, goodbye.